Hello students, welcome to the biology class. Today we are going to start with our new unit, human physiology. What do you mean by physiology? Means the functioning of our body, in which we discuss the various systems of our body in the form of digestion and absorption, breathing and exchange of gases, body fluids and circulation, excretory products and elimination, locomotion and movement, neural control and coordination, chemical coordination, and integration. The first chapter, which is your digestion and absorption, is deleted for this curriculum. So we are going to start with our second chapter, that is chapter 17th of this unit, breathing and exchange of gases. In this, what is respiration? Respiration is the oxidation of nutrients. Nutrients means your food in the living cell to release the energy for the biological work to carry out the various metabolic activities of our body. What is breathing? Breathing is the exchange of O2 from the atmosphere with the CO2 produced by the cell. So respiration is the biochemical process in which the nutrient, that is the oxidation of food, takes place, and they gives you the energy in the form of ATP to carry out the various metabolic activities of our body. And the breathing is the exchange of O2, matlab inhale of O2 and exhale of CO2. And in this particular, so we are having the phases of respiration, that is the aerobic and anaerobic, in which we are having a breathing which is known as your external respiration, and the respiration as which the exchange of gases takes place, that is your internal respiration. The next is respiratory organs. Respiratory organs and the mechanism of breathing that depends upon the habitat in which the animal lives. For example, that is the sponges, coelentrates, flatworm, the habitat of these particular, that is your water. So they are not having any special organ for the exchange of gases. By the simple diffusion through the general body surface, the exchange of gases can take place. The next example is of earthworm, leech, amphibians, that their habitat is in the moist area, so they respire through the skin or through the moist cuticle, and that particular form of the respiration is known as cutaneous respiration. The next example, that is a respiratory organ in insects, centipede, millipede, spider, is your tracheal tubes. So these are the tracheal tubes, and they are having the opening that is known as the air sac, through which the oxygen enters, CO2 release, and exchange of gases takes place through these tracheal tubes. The next example, that is your fishes, tadpoles, which are the young ones of the frog, prawn, insect, but habitat is water. That's why they are having a respiratory organs, that is your gills. And the form of respiration is known as the branchial respiration. Next example is most of vertebrates, in which we include the reptiles, birds, and mammals. The respiratory organ is lungs, and the mode of respiration is known as pulmonary respiration. So these are the lungs through which the exchange of the gases takes place. The next is your human respiratory system. This is very much familiar with you. So human respiratory system is divided into two parts. That is, one is your air tract and another is the lungs, which is considered to be the respiratory organs. The air passage or the respiratory tract is known as the conducting part, because that is the part through which the transport of atmospheric air from the atmosphere to the alveoli takes place. So in the nostrils, we are having the hair and the mucus, which helps in clearing our air particles, modifies and brings the air to the body temperature. So the air passage means when the air is passing from external nostrils, it is commonly known as the nose, to the nasal passage, then the nasal chamber, then nasopharynx. So this is your nasal cavity, nostril, and this is your nasopharynx. Then comes an opening of the trachea, which is known as the glottis, larynx, which is your sound box, trachea means windpipe, then goes to your primary bronchi, then secondary bronchi, then tertiary bronchioles, terminal bronchioles, then respiratory bronchioles, and ultimately they are going to be the part of a sac-like structure that is known as the alveoli, which is known as the structural and the functional unit of our respiratory system. The next we are discussing one part, that is your of the conducting part, that is the larynx, the sound box, voice box is a cartilaginous box which helps in the sound production. So during the swelling, that is when we intake the food, the glottis is closed by or the covered by a thin cartilaginous flap, जैसे lid की तरह, like a lid structure, that is known as the epiglottis, to prevent the entry of food into the larynx or into the air pipe. Trachea, that is known as your windpipe. So all bronchi, initial bronchioles are supported by the incomplete cartilaginous half ring. So these are the incomplete cartilaginous half ring which prevent the trachea from collapsing after the forceful expiration. The next we are having the part that is your lungs, which is known as your respiratory part after the conducting part. Lungs are situated in the thorax chamber and they are resting on the muscular dome-shaped structure that is known as your diaphragm. Right lung, that is having a 3 chambers or 3 lobes you can say, whereas the left, that is having a 2 lobes. Each lung is being covered by the membrane-like structure, double membrane structure, that is known as your pleura. Outer is parietal and inner is visceral. Visceral means soft. And in between these double membrane, we are having the fluid that is known as your pleural fluid present in between these 2 layers, which lubricates the surface of the lungs, means keep it moist and prevent the friction between the membranes. So this is a summary of your respiratory system in which the lungs is equal to bronchi, then bronchioles, then the sac-like structure that is known as the alveoli. And the alveoli and their ducts, they form the respiratory or the exchanger part because they are being surrounded by the blood capillaries. That is known as the vascularized surface. And that is known as the structural and the functional unit of the lungs or of a respiratory system. Now the steps of respiration. So first we are having the pulmonary ventilation, which is simply means the breathing intake of oxygen and exhale out of the carbon dioxide. Then gas exchange between the lungs, alveoli and the blood. Then transport of the oxygen and CO2. Exchange of the gases between the blood and tissues, and then the cellular or the tissue respiration. So one by one we will discuss the steps or the mechanism of our respiration. The first, breathing. So what is breathing? Breathing, we simply said, that is the intake of oxygen and exhaled out of the carbon dioxide. And it is divided into the 2 phases. One is inspiration and another is expiration. Inspiration means the active intake of air, means O2 from the atmosphere into the lungs, and expiration means the passive exhaling out of CO2 from the lungs to the atmosphere. So inspiration, during the inspiration, what steps are taking place? The diaphragm, which is considered the dome-shaped structure on which the lungs are going to be the resting out, that is going to be contract, means flattened. And external intercostal muscles which are present in between the ribs, they are also going to be contract. So inspiration occurs when the intrapulmonary pressure, so because of the contraction of external intercostal muscles and the flattening of the diaphragm, the vertical volume, or you can say the anterior-posterior axis increase, ribs and the sternum, this is the sternum which is present a tie-shaped bone, lift up, the volume in the dorsoventral axis is increased, means the volume of our thoracic cavity that is going to be increased, and the pressure is going to be decreased. So with increasing the thoracic volume, the pressure is going to decrease and the lungs expand and the pulmonary volume increase. If the volume is increased, means the intrapulmonary pressure is decreased. So if inside the thoracic cavity the pressure is decreased, but outside the pressure of atmospheric pressure of oxygen is increased. So because of the concentration gradient, means outer is more pressure, inner is a lesser pressure. So that means there is a difference between the pressure. So that moves from the higher pressure to the inner pressure. So with this we inhale the air, that is the oxygen, from outside into the lungs, and this process is known as inspiration. Inspiration, when the thoracic volume is going to be increased and the pressure is going to be decreased, because atmospheric pressure is increased. Because of this difference in the pressure, we will inhale the air, and inhaling of the air from atmosphere into the lungs is known as inspiration. What is expiration? That is the second phase in which we are going to exhale out the air in the form of CO2, and in that intercostal muscle diaphragm that is going to be relaxed. Thoracic regain its original position, means the volume is going to decrease, pulmonary volume is going to decrease, pressure is going to increase. Now in the thoracic, the volume is decreased, pressure is increased, whereas outside the pressure is decreased. So that's why we will exhale out the air from the lungs to the atmosphere with the increase of the pressure out inside, that is the decrease of the pressure outside and increase of the pressure inside. Again there is a concentration gradient between the pressure. So during the forceful expiration, abdominal muscles and internal intercostal muscles, they contract. So we are taking out or exhaling out the CO2, that is the expiration, and we are inhaling the O2, that is your inspiration. So inspiration plus expiration is equal to the breathing. Now we are having another topic, that is the respiratory volumes and the capacity, which we will discuss one by one. The first we are discussing, that is your tidal volume. Tidal volume means volume of air inspired or expired during the normal respiration. So this graph is showing that is your tidal volume. In the normal condition we are expiring or inspiring. The total volume is about 500 ml, that is 6000 to 8000 ml per minute. The second is your inspiratory reserve volume, additional volume of air that we inspire by the forceful inspiration, that is your tidal volume, plus the forceful inspiration, that is your inspiratory reserve volume, that is 2500 to 3000 ml. Expiratory reserve volume, additional volume of air that can be expired by the forceful expiration. So tidal volume plus forceful expiration is equal to the expiratory reserve volume, 1000 to 1100 ml. Then residual volume, the volume of air remaining in the lungs even after the forceful expiration, so which is present in the lungs every time, so that exchange of the gases takes place without any interruption. It is about 1100 to the 1200. Next is the inspiratory capacities. Now these are the pulmonary capacities, or you can say the respiratory capacities. Earlier we have discussed about the respiratory volumes, that is tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume, expiratory reserve volume and residual volume. Now we are having the respiratory capacity. So first is the inspiratory capacity, means how much air we can inhale. The total volume of air inspired after the normal expiration, that is tidal volume plus inspiratory reserve volume. Next is expiratory capacity, total volume of air expired after the normal inspiration, that is tidal volume plus expiratory reserve volume. Functional residual capacity, the volume of air remaining in the lungs after the normal expiration, that is your expiratory reserve volume plus residual volume. Vital capacity, this is very important. Respiratory capacity, volume of air that can be breathed in after forced expiration, or volume of air that can be breathed out after the forced inspiration. So this particular vital capacity is the sum total of tidal volume, expiratory reserve volume, inspiratory reserve volume, that is the intake and out of the air even after the forceful expiration or inspiration. And we check the vital capacity of the sports person, smokers. So when the graph is not up to the mark, it means that inspiratory and expiratory, or the vital capacity, is not up to the mark. Next is the total lung capacity, that is the total volume of air in the lungs after the maximum inspiration, that is residual volume, expiratory reserve volume plus tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume, or you can simply say that is your vital capacity plus residual volume. So with that we finish the various parts of our respiratory capacities, respiratory volume. But a part of respiratory tract, that is from nostril to the terminal bronchi, which is not involved in the gaseous exchange, there just is a conducting part through which the air passes, that is called as the dead space. And even in that we are having 150 ml of air. So respiratory cycle means your inspiration plus expiration. Normal respiratory or the breathing rate is 12 to 16 times per minute, and we can measure our respiratory rate with the help of an instrument that is called as a spirometer. So this is the spirometer which we inhale, exhale, and then we came to know that what is our normal breathing, what is our respiratory volumes are normal or respiratory capacities are normal. So with this we have explained the first half of our chapter, that is about the breathing, and in our next lesson we will discuss about the exchange of the gases. Till then, stay home, stay happy. Thank you.